Well, but I mean, it's interesting in contrast to the notion of what Bryce is like striving towards, the idea of that content getting transmitted, and the fact that it, yeah, the idea of keeping it intimate benefits. I mean, the question is like, Cedric also mentioned with like Lynn being here and giving some sort of evidence or proof that it did matter. Somebody did make work in reaction, And so the question is, I guess what it comes down to is what is the role of evidence, maybe? And so the idea of like having music or writing and sharing it with a few people, and maybe that is exactly what it needs and it's perfect in that moment. And then the question is, well, does it need to? It could be those 5 people you shared it with that gave them hope or helped them move forward with their day. Maybe they did something further down the road. Because you're kind of interested in like making sure that things sort of build momentum or things get carried on and passed on in sort of positive ways. But then the question is, why do we need, like, how does one identify evidence that there is this impact? Why do we need the evidence that there is the impact? Because I think about this as a teacher. I tell my students, I'm not grading you on how smart you are. I'm grading. We talked about this. Yeah. I'm grading you on the evidence. So like you were talking about the student who had this like kind of life-changing moment, but it's not in her drawing, and so it's kind of like, hey, you had it's like good for you. You may not get an A on the assignment, but you had this life-changing moment, and like the grade is not that important as far as this making progress forward.
So evidence for sure matters when you're applying for grants. So we just be honest there.
Yeah.
So there's this.
Sorry.
One of the positive things to me about the evolution or devolution of consumer society is that now in the 21st century, there exists more nuanced consumer identities than ever before. Mm-hmm. The beauty in that is it creates an opportunity for artists to more deeply investigate their own nuances, knowing that there are people out there who have new labels that they can ascribe to themselves that can help them relate to whatever you are. So it's like SoundCloud shows us this, Bandcamp shows us this. You can make something that 20 years ago, it may have only been able to be for an intimate audience of people that you really know, because the rest of the world didn't have the language to even nuance themselves like that. So it's like, I'm just this general person, and pop culture is fine. That's what's made for me. But now we have people who are doing this deep investigation who actually desire content to help
feel like you belong, like feel like you're part of it. I mean, that's why I make art, is because I'm gonna have a conversation with someone standing in front of the piece, and I'm gonna be like, I'm not alone.
So the evidence piece, on a cultural, spiritual level, the evidence comes first. It's like the society is evidence that there are new spiritual and emotional demands that people are making. There are new spiritual, emotional asks that people are making. So that evidence, to me, is all that we need to inspire new content creation. So that's what I'm seeing as evidence thing.
Maybe then, like, maybe there become so many labels, like going back to the idea of comfort in having labels. What if there continues to be fragmentation of the labels and specificity and niche, that then the labels sort of functionally maybe have a meaninglessness to them, except for to the people who use them, if they become so much...
While that's happening though, there's also the synthesis that's going on. Because the more nuances that we can articulate, then the more opportunities that we have to actually have something in common with somebody else. Before, if I only thought that Bryce was 4 things, then it's like, shit, Andy T's 4 other things. But if Andy T is like, man, I'm actually like 27 things, I'm like, well, shit, I'm actually 17 of the things that you are.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And we've learned this from living with each other.
So yeah, that's the and both of that.
I'm going to break my rule. I want to ask Anna a question. In my amateur version of what I call curating, what would you do given the same kind of circumstances where you have 2 places, one's where you're from, one's where you went for school, and you end up going to another place? How would you maybe think about if you thought it was important to bridge any of those parts of like your interests, or would you just not? You're just in this new place.
Well, it's really easy, like that's what I do. I'm from somewhere and I study here and I met you guys. Like it's all connecting in my head, even though sometimes I'm not very, I don't say that a lot, but the connections are there and it's like, I know it can be overwhelming to hear like, oh, background from. But I do think those connections are interesting and I guess the background from part turns into like, that's an interesting fact about somewhere else in the world. Then you create these sort of exchanges and people can actually see it like that. I don't know if you have that, but when I like leave somewhere for a couple of weeks, I'm always referring back to the experiences. So I'm like, I don't know. In Detroit, it's like this and that. In Detroit, you would say this. In Detroit, you would order this drink at the bar. And yeah, I mean, where you're from is just constantly in your head anyway. About curation, I think that connects to being a good host. Like, just knowing what the other person could find interesting or could take something out of, just like, I don't know, matching with people to like places, things, fun facts, stories. I see that as like a real strength or something. And I think you're pretty good at that as well, like that's how this started in a way. I mean, we've been talking about Hungary a little bit, with you, but yeah, even within this conversation there were a lot of points where I'm like, okay, that's an interesting triangle in a way. Yeah, I'm hoping that it can develop into something, but like, the thing about Hungary is that the public funding is either non-existing or so poisonous that nobody wants to take it. And it's like, artists are censoring themselves because obviously you wouldn't want to like apply with something that won't get funded, so I don't see, this sort of exchange happening from Hungary or with the support of Hungary. I think it would have to happen some other way. There are other ways, of course, and I guess these sort of situations inspire you to be like, okay, I've got this drive now, we gotta do this. So yeah, we'll see. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited that you're also taking it on because that's the other unexpected thing that you never really want to tell someone is like, I really hope you think about it in your context because there's nothing more interesting to me than how this won't be as even helpful for people who are from Detroit or Glasgow. And on the converse, couldn't Detroit and Glasgow also learn from Budapest and Hungary because of things like professors who, like, one thing in the conversations between me and Anna was that you were describing when professors are making artwork, you know that they're some of the most compromised artists. And that was like mind-blowing to me until you described it as a place where the politics are so powerful that you really remember that the education is an arm of the state. And then I start thinking about how so many people who are in this project are professors, and I wouldn't think like, you guys have too much, that you're, I just wouldn't think of you as being more compromised. I think of the struggle of trying to get that job. So just things in terms of when we look at places, I do feel like, wouldn't you want to look at the place that doesn't have not even the feeling of being a center, but it's like, there is going to be a problem, and when the problems are more obvious, in some ways, the things to do will have to happen, and you then want to be there when those things were happening, because you don't want to come in and be like, oh, now I want to. Yeah.
God, I see the light.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to go somewhere because someone told you this is a place of solutions.
Oh.
We briefly touched on that. So there was this curator here at GSA talking about her practice in the Caribbean, I think. And she was saying that even though they're working like in poor conditions, she thinks that, or she believes that what they're doing is revolutionary because everybody else is going to be in the same situation very, very soon. And then they're kind of experimenting with ways how to work in those conditions. And I kind of feel like Hungary is trying to survive within those conditions that are like, a right-wing administration, conservative cultural policies, I don't know, an economy falling apart,